y'all, and welcome back to another episode of There's Danger Here. I'm Leilani, and today I'm going to be bringing a case from England. So, let's get in it, shall we? On April 8th, 1899, John Reginald Holliday Christie was born to parents Ernest and Mary in Northam, West Riding of Yorkshire in England. The sixth of 7 children, but the only boy in the family. Ernest was touted as a harsh disciplinarian to his children, but quiet and reserved to others, showing almost no emotion. His mother and his sisters purportedly also beat John during his youth. John therefore grew to be quiet and unpopular, though he was a pretty bright child. He did also become known as a hypochondriac, always assuming he had some sort of illness or another. When John was 8, his grandfather passed away. Seeing his dead body, John realized that he was interested in this. And after this event, he began breaking into local vaults in order to try and see other dead bodies. Then later in life, he would say that this gave him a sense of peace and calm, and he would start to associate death with pleasure. As John hit puberty, he began delusional thinking. He believed that his sisters were taunting him with their bodies, and often found himself sexually attracted to them. Disgusting, I know. This led to a sexual dysfunction that would plague him for the rest of his life. At 15, John decided to leave school. In order to earn money, he worked as an assistant projectionist at the local cinema. And at this time, we really don't hear anything about John, no contact with the law or anything. And then, John enlisted in the military at the start of World War I, where he joined the 52nd Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire Regiment as an infantryman in 1918. At this time, John claimed to have been hit with mustard gas. He claimed the mustard gas resulted in blindness, though he wasn't blind. In addition, he also claimed that he lost the ability to speak at a normal volume, being diagnosed with hysterical muteness, in which he couldn't talk above a whisper. This condition lasted for 3 solid years, and even after, when he was in stress or stress-induced environments, he'd begin to whisper again. John met Ethel Waddington Simpson from Sheffield when he returned from the war in 1919. The couple married on May 20th, 1920. John at this time paid the bills by working as a postman, and this is where it begins. On April 12th, 1921, John was sentenced to 3 months in prison after being found guilty of theft of postal orders. In January 1923, he received 12 months probation for obtaining money by false pretense and violence. 4 years into their marriage, John and Ethel separated, and John, at this time, moved to London. The same year, he was charged with theft and 2 larceny crimes, and by September, was sentenced to an additional 9 months in prison. After he got out, he moved to Battersea and lived with a known sex worker. In May 1929, he was sentenced to 6 months hard labor after being convicted of assault on the sex worker he moved in with. He beat her with a cricket bat. In 1923, he was sent to prison for another 3 months after he stole a priest's car. Now we can fast forward, and 14 years later, in 1934, Ethel and John decided to try and begin again. In 1937, they moved into a flat at 10 Rillington Place in London. The next year in December, they moved down to the first floor of the same flat. And now at this time, it should be reported that, again, those issues that were plaguing John continued. It was evident at the beginning of the relationship, but Ethel had thought that they worked through it. Still, after getting back together, they continued, and when they split the first time, John used prostitutes to fill the void. He had the ability to grow more and more violent with them in order to get his sexual pleasure. When Ethel returned, the prostitutes didn't cease. He simply saw them when she was away. Then, in 1939, World War II broke out and John volunteered for the War Reserve Police. John became a special constable at the Harrow Road Police Station. There he worked for 4 years. And during this time, John claimed that he learned a lot about medical things. One such was that of the effects of gas. Later, he reported knowing so much that he could use gas as a curative measure from bronchitis, and that he could even perform abortions. At this time, he also began stalking women, keeping notes on them, though I couldn't find anywhere that says that he ever was found guilty of anything or even charged with anything. But in 1943, he resigned from the position, and he did begin working at a radio factory as a clerk. During the same year, he met a prostitute, Ruth First, on August 16, 1943. Ruth worked in Ladbroke Grove at a snack bar. After meeting him, he convinced her to go home with him. During intercourse, he strangled and killed her. First, he hid her body under the floorboards of the living room, but after some time, he moved her to the back garden, and I could not find the length of time that he decided to keep her under the floorboards, so I don't know if it was hours, days, months, but she was moved eventually. In October 1944, John was talking with coworker Muriel Eady, a 32-year-old with bronchitis. John met her at work at the radio factory and managed somehow to convince her that he knew how to cure bronchitis. So she went home with him, and John said that the cure was Friar's balsam, which she needed to inhale. Instead, he treated her with the gas. When she was unconscious, he raped, then strangled her, and she too died. He placed her body next to Ruth First in the yard. In 1948, 24-year-old Timothy and 19-year-old Beryl Evans, a couple, moved into the apartment complex above John. The young couple had a newborn, Geraldine, shortly after moving in, though they did seem like unlikely parents. You see, Timothy's IQ placed him in a category of mental retardation, and Beryl's IQ was also below average. Timothy did manage to find work, but the pay barely covered their expenses, and several reports stated that Beryl often neglected Geraldine, that she didn't clean, and that she couldn't cook. Timothy had struggled with anger his entire life, and as an adult it was exacerbated by alcohol, to the point where he'd get violent with Beryl. In August 1948, a friend, Lucy Endicott, joined the family in the apartment. Beryl believed Timothy had gotten a job, and this job would take him away from the home for a while, and so Lucy offered to come and help with baby Geraldine. But the trio wasn't a good mix, and soon the couple was fighting even more. After all, Timothy had found himself on the couch, while Lucy and Beryl slept in the bed. Beryl's mother believed it was due to Lucy's presence, and she was forced to move out. Shortly after, Timothy followed her. Those two lived for months before Lucy left, owing to, again, Timothy's increasing violence, especially while drinking. Timothy returned to Beryl, who took him back, and soon Beryl found herself pregnant again. But money was already tight, and so Beryl went to look for ways to induce a miscarriage. She took pills and douches, but none of it worked, and Beryl would talk with anyone who would listen about wanting to get rid of this pregnancy. Unfortunately, this included neighbor John and wife Ethel. On November 8th, 1948, Timothy came home from work, but Geraldine and Beryl, they weren't there. John immediately rushed up the stairs and told Timothy he had attempted to perform an abortion on Beryl, but unfortunately, due to a complication, she and the unborn baby had both died. So, John decided to help Timothy out and sent Geraldine away with a couple he knew that could care for her. John also told Timothy he should definitely get out of town for a while, and so Timothy left. He went to stay with his mother. But Timothy's mother rightfully asked where Geraldine and Beryl were, and eventually Timothy broke down and told her everything he knew. On November 30th, she took Timothy to the police station to report Beryl's death. Under questioning, Timothy first stated that he had accidentally killed her by giving her medication to cause an abortion, stuffing her in a sewer drain. But after a search yielded absolutely nothing, police went back to Timothy, who then confessed he was actually his neighbor John, who attempted to complete an abortion and, due to a complication, had accidentally caused her death along with the unborn child. Upon hearing this, police went back to the apartment, and they didn't find anything immediately, but they went to the community laundry room in the backyard and found it stuck. A helpful Ethel gave them a metal bar to try and pry the door open. When they did manage to get in, police found Beryl wrapped in a tablecloth. Geraldine's body was found under a stack of wood in the room with a man's necktie around her neck. Both her and Beryl's cause of death was strangulation. But police, after hearing multiple stories from Timothy, went back and interrogated him. This time he confessed to killing both his wife and child, though he later withdrew that confession and went back to claiming it was John. And we don't know what type of interrogation techniques were used at this time, but again, Timothy was probably under a lot of stress. Not only was he slow mentally, but he had just been told that his wife and child were killed. And so I'm sure he confessed under duress multiple times, trying to get the police whatever information that would make them happy and make the questions stop. So the police charged Timothy with the murder. A trial for the murder of Geraldine began on January 11th, 1950. And at this trial that included not one, but two witnesses that changed their story, including John Christie at this time, during questions, the jury still found Timothy guilty and sentenced him to murder. On March 9th, 1950, Timothy was hanged for this supposed crime. On January 6th, 1952, John resigned from his job. On the 14th of December, he decided he now had enough of 54-year-old Ethel, and while she was asleep in bed, strangled her. Her body was then wrapped in a blanket and then placed in the floorboards of the parlor. To explain where Ethel was, John stated to her family that she had rheumatism and couldn't write letters. Others were told that she had gone to visit relatives. And on January 26, 1953, a month later, John forged Ethel's signature and emptied her bank account. On January 19, 1953, 25-year-old Rita Nelson, an immigrant from Ireland, was at the bar drinking with her sister. She was upset after realizing she was pregnant. John also happened to be at the bar, and of course began chatting up Rita, offering to help by performing an abortion at his house. So, she followed him to his apartment. There she inhaled the gas that she was given by John. This rendered her unconscious, and when she was out, he raped and strangled her. That night, he left her body where he'd killed her and went to bed. Apparently, killing her was too much for him to manage. In the morning, he placed a cloth over her head and tied it. He also shoved a cloth between her legs, afraid of something that would seep out, then tied her ankles together. After this, he put her in the pantry behind a cupboard vertically, though she was put in upside down. In February of 1953, 26-year-old Kathleen Maloney ran into John while spending a day drinking at Notting Hill Cafe. Kathleen had actually met John before, the previous December, while he was with another prostitute, and at that time she had joined the duo. On this day, Kathleen and a friend were discussing looking for a new place. John told her he had an empty room, and so Kathleen went home to see it. As soon as she was there, he sat her in the kitchen chair and used gas on her. Once again, he raped and strangled her. And again, this was just too much for him, so he left her in the chair and went to bed. When he got up in the morning, he wrapped her in a blanket and placed her next to Rita in the pantry. She was right side up. On March 6, 1953, John met Hectorina while collecting his unemployment benefits at the labor exchange. Again, he somehow convinced her to come to his place. Once there, he gave her a drink and attempted to place the gas tubing near her head. She saw this and immediately attempted to flee. Unfortunately, he caught her and strangled her until she lost consciousness. Then she was put in the kitchen chair and gassed further. After this, he did his unfortunate usual rape and strangulation routine. He tied her wrists with a handkerchief and then placed her in the cupboard with her back to the door. Margaret Forrest suffered migraines, and when she met John, he told her that coal gas could be used to cure a great many things. He gave her his address, and they agreed to meet up. But she was a no-show, and so he went to her place and demanded she come to his immediately. She agreed to meet him, likely to get him away from her house, but again, failed to show up, luckily for her. On March 20th, 1963, John met Mrs. Riley and invited her to his flat as she was looking for a place to live. When she arrived that afternoon, she brought somebody with her, her husband. Together, the two looked at the apartment and John offered to sublet it to him. They agreed and moved in. However, that same night, the landlord arrived and found the couple. And at this time, subletting wasn't legal, and so they were ordered to vacate by morning. So they did. The landlord then allowed Bursford Brown, the top floor resident, to use the kitchen in John's flat, as Burford's wasn't working. On March 24th, Bursford was trying to attach a bracket to the wall for a radio mount to have something to listen to while he was cooking. But he found a hollow area, and so he peeled the wallpaper and found a door. This door was locked, but had a large enough crack that Bursford could see inside, and upon finding its contents, immediately notified local police. Police entered and found Hectorina first, then the other two women. As they went through the flat, a loose floorboard caught their attention, and so they began removing them, and there they found Ethel. They decided after this that it was probably prudent to search the yard as well, and there they found a femur just propped up against a wooden fence. So they dug. There they found two bodies. The police also found a tobacco tin containing hair, pubic hair, if we're going to be specific about this, of 4 women. But none of it matched the women in the pantry. Only one sample was confirmed to be that of Ethel's, meaning there was unaccounted women's hair in the tin. The women in the garden were skeletal and therefore couldn't be matched. Additionally, Beryl was actually later exhumed and her hair didn't match either. So there's somewhere between 1 to 3 samples not accounted for in this tin, and he does not talk about this at all that I could find. Meanwhile, back on March 20th, John had booked a room for a week at the Rowtown House in King's Cross. He stayed there 4 nights before leaving. after which he hid his suitcase in a storage locker and stayed on the streets. On March 31st, he was seen by a police officer, and during the interaction gave a fake identity, but it didn't work, and John was subsequently arrested. John was taken to the Putney police station and interviewed. After being told of what police found in his flat, he didn't argue. He immediately began confessing to killing them. According to him, however, he was the victim, or at least not to blame. For Ethel, he stated, she started choking, and when he realized she couldn't be saved, he thought he better put her out of her misery. So John strangled her with her own stocking. For Rita Nelson, she had attempted to extort poor John. When John went to leave, she followed him and tried to hit him with a frying pan in his home. She fell backwards over a chair. Then John simply blacked out, and when he came to, she was strangled. Note the excess sarcasm here. Kathleen Maloney made advances, and he denied her, so she threatened him. Then again, his memory just fades out, and when he came to, wouldn't you know it, another woman was dead. Hectorina McLennan was living with him because she was homeless, He thought he was being a good guy, but they didn't get along, and after a few days, she was told she had to leave. She returned the next night, and when he refused to let her in, they got into a struggle. She ended up somehow on the floor, and as she fell, her clothes just happened to wrap around her neck and strangled her. Oh my goodness. After this, police asked about the two women in the garden, and instead of just claiming his ignorance, he reported that Ruth First was a prostitute. That one time, when they were together, Ethel sent a telegram that she was coming home earlier than planned, along with her brother. Ruth, she said she loved John and that they absolutely needed to be together. And John decided they could still have sex. But afterwards, he strangled her, so, he couldn't tell Ethel. But then he couldn't just leave the body there, so he buried her. Muriel Eady was also sexually aggressive to him, and so again, he just had to kill her so that Ethel wouldn't find out about this. While awaiting trial, John did actually start to admit to pieces of the murders, including method of sedation, rape, and strangulation. He adamantly denied raping their corpses. He also admitted to killing Beryl Evans in 1949. The Crown, after hearing all of this, ordered a psychiatric evaluation to ensure that he was sane and fit for trial. He was ultimately deemed sane for trial. On June 22nd, 1953, John stood trial for the murder of his wife, Ethel. Even after a psychiatric evaluation, the defense entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, because why not? They even found a psychiatrist for the right amount of money, Dr. Jack Abbott Hobson, who reported John to be a severe hysteric, obviously as evidenced by his hypochondria and his whispering tone that had returned. Prosecution consented to the hysteria, but noted that didn't affect his ability to reason. John took the stand in his own defense, and as a result, was subjected to questioning about every single one of the murders that he had committed, including the one of Beryl Evans, in which he stated, he completely forgot about it, even though he testified against Timothy at Timothy's trial previously. This trial lasted a total of 4 days, and just 86 minutes after the jury retired, they returned with a verdict. He was guilty, and the penalty was death, set to be carried out the next month in July. True enough, on July 15th, 1953, at 54 years of age, John was led to the gallows at the rear of the prison, as there were no demonstrations, though reports state that somewhere between 100 and 200 people did go to the prison on the day of the hanging. According to a newspaper, Excerpt from the Times, Dr. James Mason, the prison medical officer, stated that the, quote, execution was expeditiously carried out and in the proper manner. Death was instantaneous, end quote. On a side note, after this, according to All That's Interesting, quote, in 1966, after 2 official inquiries, Timothy Evans received a royal pardon, and in 2003, his sister and half-sister received compensation for the miscarriage of justice, end quote. And that is the case of John Christie, the Rillington Place strangler, and the exoneration of Timothy Evans. To all those out there listening, be careful. It's a dangerous world we live in.